Full lights, start sound, camera, action. BabuKishan's. Spot.
Hi, my name is Randeep Sarai. I'm the Federal Liberal Member of Parliament for Surrey Centre. My background is I was born and raised here in Vancouver, British Columbia. My father came in 1959 and my mother came in 1969. I was born in 1975 and grew up in Burnaby and moved to Surrey about 12 years ago. I have five half-brothers, and I'm the youngest, the sixth of them, so I have a big family, but at the same time I'm an only child because of my age difference. I grew up in Burnaby and I got into politics actually while I was there, but I'll go into that later. I went to university at Queen's University for my law, and I did my undergraduate degree at the University of British Columbia, UBC, and I did a Bachelor of Science in that. So that's kind of my education background. So I'm someone who was actually truly forged in Canadian society, and probably the first generation that was of the new multicultural and Charter of Rights era. So I was first year kindergarten was 1980, the year the Charter of Rights and Freedoms were made, and just shortly after multiculturalism was implemented as a policy. So I was only in kindergarten, and my teacher, Miss Crawford, said, "I want to go see your parents. I have to visit your parents." And I was a bit alarmed. You're a young kid. You're 5 years old, and usually a visit to your parents or a visit by your parents means you're in trouble. Back then, teachers did go to your house, or they had your parents come over. So when she came to my home, my parents were concerned, and they thought maybe I'd done something wrong, or maybe I wasn't up to speed, or slower in some aspect. It turned out, she said, look, the world is changing. Canada is a multicultural country. Languages and culture are not to be just accepted, but to be celebrated. And I have a promise I want to get out of you as parents, that you will teach your son Punjabi and more languages if possible, but not only to speak it, but to read and write it. And she said this will be a valuable tool in my employment and my contribution to society in the future. And she said, don't worry about English, that's my job, I'll take care of the English. And I took that to heart, because when you're young and you're from an immigrant family and you're settling in Canada, you want to be like the rest. And here's a Caucasian teacher, very well liked, very friendly, telling you, no, you have to learn your language, you have to master it, and it'll be a tool in the future. And I noticed the value of that, not then, but years later. My mastery of Punjabi was attributed mostly to her because of her instructions at such a young age. It wasn't the opposite of where my parents had to tell me to speak it. It was because of my kindergarten teacher. So that was a really firm embedment of what our Canadian culture and Canadian values are. It almost becomes your DNA. So my early start, I guess politically, somewhat came from those values at that point. So over time, after going through university at UBC, the pressures of getting married and finding your significant other started getting upon me, and I was introduced to my beautiful wife Sarabjit by one of my best friends, in fact my best friend at the time and still is, and we met and shortly after got married. We both went off to Queen's University together. In fact, we went the day after we got married. I started law school and she started her master's program in political science. And that was really when I got thoroughly involved in politics, because her first job that she landed after doing her master's was working for the Prime Minister's office as a writer. We had a successful career there. She moved back, and likewise after finishing my law school, I came back and opened my practice here in beautiful British Columbia. We have 3 kids, Guru Sandesh Kaur, who's 12, Ishar, who's 9, and Gurbani, who's 6. All very active in sports and very active in the academic endeavors. So our evenings are full, and we're basically taxi drivers in the evening, shuffling them from one location to another. And I guess this new task as a member of parliament will force my wife to do more of the taxi driving than I do. So it's been a good journey so far, and we're continuing to work harder on that. When it comes to politics, I was involved in politics at a very young age. My father always felt that as Canadians we have to give back to society. We have to contribute, be involved in politics, be involved in community affairs, whether it be fighting polio for the Rotary Club, whether it was interfaith activities between different religious groups, whether it's working for helping city council on rezoning applications for faith-based groups and their places of worship. I would follow along with my father. I would hand out flyers for political candidates when I was young. I remember getting blisters on my feet, and I was only 6 years old, handing out flyers for Sven Robinson, an NDP MP actually at the time, who was probably one of the hardest working members of parliament and someone who was my starting role model. Shortly thereafter, 1993, Herb Dhaliwal got elected, and that kind of inspired a lot of us South Asians that, look, somebody of our community can get elected, can become a cabinet member, and can contribute back. And that's when I decided that the Liberal Party is my party. So I had my father never steered me away. In fact, he encouraged me, even though he had roots in the NDP party before that, but he encouraged me to contribute, and I joined the party shortly thereafter, but mostly helped with them. And like I said, when my wife got hired by the Prime Minister's office, I was more involved. And shortly after that, we had a lot of shootings in Vancouver. Over 100 young South Asian males had died, all in gangland violence, brutal gangland violence, and nobody was getting arrested, nobody was getting charged. There was no intervention programs, no prevention programs, and the community was lost. So we felt that we need to do something, and a lot of bright minds like the Honourable Wally Opal, Herb Dhaliwal, said, hey, we need to do something as a community. So we formed some charitable organizations to help fund the nonprofit side for the intervention programs and the prevention programs. And at the same time, we also formed a group of South Asian societies so that we can lobby the government to say, hey, we need a share of the resources, we need more commitment to get these gangsters convicted and to stop this horrendous crime. And we can't afford to have more of our sons or brothers die. And that was when we had 21 societies sit together and lobby the government, and out of that came the Integrated Gang Task Force and a lot of other good policies that came out, which significantly reduced the proportionate amount of South Asian men dying. And for a long period of time, the murder rate or shooting rate went down. Unfortunately, that same ingredients have now popped up in Surrey, and we have to deal with that menace again in a region-wide basis. But what it showed me is that you don't have to be a politician, you don't have to be from a political background, but if you can get your community together, you can get different stakeholders together, different levels of government together, you can get big things done. That was a $110 million integrated gang task force. Nobody normally thinks that some community groups can get a big police budget or a big police force that is needed. And it was actually on the police's own advice that we took their advice and said, if this is what you need, we will lobby to make sure it happens. And I'm proud to say that I was able to be a part of that. I chose the Liberal Party because it basically formed who I am, and I formed a lot of the great ideals that Canada has. Not to say that other parties never contributed. I think the Conservatives did a great job to end apartheid in Africa, but the significant core issues that Canadians value and Canadians cherish were brought by the Liberal Party of Canada. And I saw that the Liberal Party of Canada, through thick and thin, whether popular or not, always stuck by principle first and never compromised principle over policy or votes. So whether that was the Charter of Rights, which gave me the right and everybody else the right to wear a turban, a hijab, be free from gender discrimination, racial discrimination, whether it be the multiculturalism policies that said, hey, come to Canada as long as you fit the values of Canada, you can celebrate your culture, you can celebrate your languages, and we are going to have more languages, and that's quite evident when you land at the airport. You'll be greeted by at least 5 to 10 languages. You can get brochures of every government source in those languages. And so that really gave me a sense of pride that my party was doing the right thing. The other big significant thing when it came time to decisions of war, where countries really make or break international doctrine or determine war, and war is a very touchy subject and a very sensitive issue that has to be handled very well. I think Canada in the past has been on the right course. It chose not to go into Iraq, and we now all know, the whole world knows that that was a mistake. And it was the Liberal Party under John Chrétien who said, no, I'm not going to go there. I will only go under UN-sanctioned missions or NATO-sanctioned missions. And there's not enough evidence to convince us to go there. So that gave me a sense of pride. We were also the only country in the world that was always #1 in peacekeeping forces, and we were the pride of the diplomatic world. I think that's deteriorated now. However, now with our Liberal government, I think we'll be able to restore that. So going forward, our party's commitment is to bring the fighter jets back, stop our military action in Iraq, as well as and Syria, as well as in a local issue. My most important role is to help reduce crime. Crime is probably the foremost issue in Surrey and Surrey Centre. My second is to get affordable housing for those that are in need. And the third is transportation and infrastructure. Surrey is in much need of SkyTrain or LRT or other modes of transit. And whatever the citizens of Surrey or the stakeholders like the City Council and the province decide, I want to make sure that our Liberal government gives their fair share of that commitment and gets it done rapidly. On the crime side, I've committed to a task force within 60 days to deal with the crime issue, bring all the levels of government together, and once we have them together, we're going to try to curb this property crime and gang violence crime all at once. So I want to thank all the volunteers, supporters, and voters who not only encouraged me to run, but helped with hope and hard work and gave their sweat and blood to make sure I get elected. I want to thank all the voters who gave me their trust, and it's a very humbling experience to be honored to get such a significant vote in a riding that was never won by a Liberal candidate since 1953. And really it was the first time that the Liberals won this riding and won it so significantly. So I want to give a message to all young people, all immigrants, that look, Canada is an open place. Canada is a place where your dreams can come true, regardless of how you look, regardless of your faith, long as you cherish the values of our charter, cherish the values of being Canadian, you can celebrate your diversity and live in this beautiful country, which is probably one of the freest democracies in the world. But you must remember that your vote was earned very hard. Our forefathers fought for those rights to get the right to vote. You must never lose that right, and you must always exercise the right to vote. You must always be active in politics so that the governments know that you mean something and you have something to contribute and your issues are important to them. This is very important for a lot of minority groups who think sometimes there's no purpose in getting involved with the government. You need to be active, you need to be forward-thinking, and you need to give ideas, because if you give them, you will get results. So I again ask all the younger generation to be inclusive, but be participatory. Participate in the political system, get involved in your local clubs, whichever political party you may want to be, whether that's in your high school or whether that's in your university, and whether that's post-university. Make sure you get involved and make sure you give your ideas, because this country is a wonderful place and it has a role for future generations to come.